Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new edition of Pod by the Bay, proudly presented by the Bay Area Examiner. I'm your host, Nathan Bond, joined alongside Seth Farnador, Robert Steeg, and Anthony Vito. Guys, let's jump into it. Busy podcast ahead. USF completed their 5th day of fall camp. As we gear up toward year one with head coach Alex Golesh at the helm. Seth, you and I were out at practice on Saturday morning. It was tough to find parking, not because of the clamoring of media members at practice, but because it was graduation weekend. So lots of folks on campus for that. We kind of had it all to ourselves. General thoughts. What would you feel about practice, and then we'll kind of get into Coach Golesh's comments at his weekly press conference here on Monday.
Yeah, I thought practice was lively. I think the first thing we heard as soon as we walked through the gate was like an MF bomb from across the field. So that's always like get you right back in the mood, right? I thought it was. We didn't get to see a ton. We got to see a little bit of O-line, D-line 101, got to talk to some people. Saw, a couple guys on the exercise bike that you didn't know maybe, nursing some ailments, and those are on the Ponderosa and the Insider Discord. If you're $5 a month on Patreon, you get access to that. If you want to know who was on the exercise bike. But, I thought it was good. We didn't get to see a ton of offensive stuff. We got to see a little bit of how the defense was going to align where they were running through some things. So I think I have a better idea of what they're trying to do on defense. Offensively, nothing too crazy, but it was good to see some O-line, D-line interaction, some good-natured trash talk, and then the coaches not letting it devolve into like fighting, letting guys get after it and be competitive, but not fight, which is a big waste of time. So we didn't get to see a ton, but what we got to see, I was pleased with. I thought it was good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be out there at practice on Tuesday. It's the first fully padded day, so they're going to be clapping pads. It's going to be a lot of fun. I am anticipating a lot of energy from these guys who are just been kind of clamoring for an opportunity, and hopefully, who was it? Was it Rashad White who just got absolutely blown up the other day at Bucks practice? Some running back got absolutely annihilated, and it basically caused a fight. So hopefully there's not that. Kind of protect your own. There's only so many scholarship players to go around. Let's not get hurt before we start. Steeg, Vito, welcome in. I know Seth and I were just kind of recapping, right? I want to make sure you guys join the conversation. Steeg, I'm pretty sure you got a chance to listen to head coach Alex Golesh's comments from his Monday presser. First kind of thoughts. I know you had a pretty funny quip about coach speak that I thought was probably pretty apt for this time of year that we should probably always remember.
Right. And the key of it all is, for press conferences in the fall and the spring, it's like you mentioned, it's coach speak. They're giving you exactly what you want to hear, as reporter, as medias. They're not going to get up there and be like, crap, guys, defense looked terrible today. Our defensive line, it's got so many problems. That's just kind of what coaches do. They'll talk about the highlights. They'll talk about the goods, the greats, and the really greats. And it was kind of evident today in Golesh's press conference, but that's probably a better thing, because I don't know if you guys were getting the same vibe as I was, during the previous press conferences. He almost seemed like down on himself a little bit, like, kind of having to temper the expectations of everyone, saying, we're not going to be very good. We've got a lot to do. We've got a lot of this. We got a lot of that. This was the first time he was kind of like, yeah, today was really good. Today, like, he looked like he was excited to actually like talk about some of the players for the first time. He went in extensive detail talking about, the tight end group, the wide receivers, the running backs, and, how they were playing and everything. And he seemed excited for the progress that they had been making. which sounds weird to say from like a coach, but what he was giving us before was like, oh yeah, we did pretty good, but we made some mistakes, and we're gonna see how things are, and we see how things shake out. But he had glowing reviews for like everyone. I mean, he was talking about walk-ons, making plays and doing some big things. Shout out Colin Affleck on the tight end group. That's kind of unheard of for what we had come to expect from Golesh at this point. So, it was definitely an interesting press conference he gave today.
I thought it was interesting how many guys it seemed like they had missing for parts of spring. Is one thing. It was
Right.
like it seemed like he'd mentioned a guy. Every other guy he mentioned was like, yeah, we didn't have him fully for spring, or we only had him for part of spring, or he didn't finish spring. So I think that's part of the excitement too. Is maybe he's got some, knock on wood, some more health relatively across the team, and he's able to kind of see what more of these guys can do, which could lead to him being happy, depending on who it is.
Right. And the old adage, all returning production is not great returning production. So he's got to hope there's some vast improvement with coaching him up and, self-player development. I think he coming in and, he harped on the 7 offensive scholarship offensive linemen and the people we talked to around the program over the weekend. And he kind of mentioned it today, Vito. He's pretty pleased with where the offensive line can be. A lot of transfers at that position for sure. Zen Herring from Florida State, who's played a lot of football. He's going to be a guy, and Vito, I know your family's Florida State-ish adjacent, so I figured, kind of talk to me about the offensive line, what you think could be, and do you feel like they have the depth to kind of roll out any kind of 5 and actually be pretty productive after they having to replace 4 guys from last year's offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, brother and wife, both Florida State grads, so definitely runs in the family. I was shocked to hear that about the offensive line. I mean, when we wrote the article in spring, it was just a lot of newcomers, a lot of trying to figure out how you're going to fit the pieces back together, who's going to go where, who's going to be there for spring practice, who's going to be there for fall. And the fact that they're flipping guys around. They seem like they have a good group that they can kind of move in any direction. And I mean, especially in this offense, when you're just trying to protect the quarterback as quickly as possible, it's really great to have versatility. So that was a shock to me to hear that, but I like to hear that early on. You kind of figure the skill's never really going to be the problem in the skill positions on this team. So being able to get some consistency on the offensive line. I mean, Mike Lofton being at center, that's crazy to me. I would not have expected that. So good to really see that. And, you take it with a grain of salt, what they're saying. We don't know what we're seeing. It could be, hey, we're going to say that just to kind of fire guys up, and maybe it's not as good as we think it is. But I'm really happy about that. I mean, hopefully we can kind of get some guy. I mean, hopefully we can kind of get some depth. That's always been the problem, is one guy goes down, you start shifting over, and then that ends up being a whole domino effect. So, looking forward to it and see what group can be there on day one.
And it seemed like, and we kind of talked about it at practice, they had a bunch of injuries last year on the offensive line. So there's a decent number of guys that got some snaps in live games last year, not including the transfers they brought in. RJ Perry looked really good in the practice we saw in one-on-ones. He kind of stonewalled some people. Bailey, I think, got a couple pretty good reps. Bowie had some good reps as well. And seems like he's going to be a depth piece. So I think you feel pretty good, at least about the starting unit, the way they're talking about him. But like Vito said it, it could just be kind of trying to fire the boys up a little bit or sending a message to other players. But those were guys that we kind of thought might. It seemed like the guys that and Sean put in the Discord who he thought maybe the top 5 might be based on what he's hearing and what he thinks. And it seemed like those were the 5 that got singled out by Golesh when he talked about the offensive line today. So that kind of tracks, and that's kind of good to see. Maybe those guys that you think might be the more talented ones are the ones that are maybe separating from the pack.
And in case anybody forgot, it's Coach Hudenik, who is the former UCF offensive lineman, who is the first-time offensive line coach. So maybe that pays dividends, and and looks good for the future. But I always find fall camp to be more interesting than spring camp. I mean, you're closer to football for sure, but in spring it just seems like, if you're injured, you're gonna lay off for it. For now, it's kind of like you're competing for a job. So, like I said, don't injure anybody, but it's kind of nice to see who's actually on campus, who's competing, and who's looking good on film, or not film, looking good on the field.
And you mentioned Mike Lofton kind of sliding over to center. Donovan Jennings, he's been kind of cross training inside at guard, which kind of tracks and makes sense when you bring a guy in like RJ Perry, who's just a behemoth of a man, and kind of makes Dono look a little small. It's probably a good thing. I know Zane Herons, I think they said they were looking at him at left guard. So Donald probably right guard, backup left tackle, maybe starting right tackle. I think he'll be a starter somewhere. Where he ultimately ends up is going to be kind of interesting. I know Golesh said in the press conference on Monday, he's kind of hoping to start down the track of having some depth charts over the next week or so, kind of figuring out where everything kind of fits. So that'll be a lot of fun to see. I believe it's next Thursday is their first scrimmage at Southeastern University over in Lakeland. So that'll definitely give us a lot of information about that. And is there anything else from the press conference that kind of caught your eye? I'll open it to the floor, whoever wants to talk, and then I've got a pretty explosive question to ask after this.
I thought it was good to see the mention of Chaffee Brown. We saw him. We heard he had a pretty good camp thus far, and then he made a really good one-handed catch that we talked about in the Discord on Saturday morning. Really good one-handed catch over the middle. He's a guy that has been one that I thought from the beginning of Golesh's tenure. This is a guy that fits this offense if he's right, because he's just straight line speed, go kind of guy. So if he's right and he's having a good camp, I think that really bodes well. And then, there was a few receivers. It seemed like the receiver room's pretty competitive based on what we heard from people when we were on campus there. So Naeem Simmons has made some plays. He looked really smooth. So that was my two biggest question marks for the offense kind of going into the year, with the offensive line and the receiver room. And we haven't been able to see a ton, but hearing good things about both groups makes you feel a little bit better about the offense can kind of stay around where they ended up last year, which was a really, really good offense.
I was both of us did the thing. For me at least, it was Golesh kind of segued into the running back room there for a second, and he made sure to kind of give credit where credit was due. Talking about Naquan Wright, Kelly Joyner, Mikey Dukes, and the work that those guys are putting in. But man, he sounded really excited about Dominic Ganella and kind of his path to coming to USF. The big thing was that, they didn't really need another running back. But Dominic apparently came in kind of talking like, hey, I want to be part of that culture. I want to bring, some of the grit, some of the grind that I got, working at being a bell cow back in North Dakota State and also being in the, minor league baseball system. I think he probably brings a little bit of a different perspective in that running back room that, frankly might need, a leader of some sort to kind of step up and be that vocal guy. And Dominic Ganella seems like that kind of piece, especially as a local guy. He sounded very excited to kind of have him in the mix, not necessarily as your feature back. I think it's pretty obvious that Naquan Wright is going to be, the dude back there. But, you have an arsenal, you have a Swiss Army knife of running backs back there. It's just using those guys strategically in this up-tempo offense, because you're not always, it's not always in your best interest, on a 4th down and short, to sub out Naquan Wright for Dominic Ganella, or, vice versa. It's not always in your best interest from a 3rd down and 15 to make a sub there. Sometimes you just got to go fast. So I'm interested to see how they make all of that work, knowing that you have, 4 running backs with 4 very different skill suits like that.
Yep. And Dominic Noah is the brother of former USF baseball player Anthony Ganella. So there's a connection there to the area. He went to Bloomingdale. And he's been playing baseball for the Arizona Diamondbacks for the last 3-4 years. He was just, I think he's wrapped up rookie. I think rookie ball's wrapped up now. He played 12 games. He hit 282 with a 391 on base percentage and slugged over 500. So his OPS was 904. Had 2 homers, 7 RBIs, and 2 stolen bases. He needs to work on the strikeout numbers. 16 strikeouts to just 4 walks. But he's the culture guy, right? And Golesh has kind of really harped on this. Like, you guys chose to stay. You're my guys. But it's really a reflection on, okay, you're my guys, but I'm bringing people in and I'm putting my name on that they're also our kind of guys. So I think culture's really emphasized, I think, in college football and in sports in general. I wouldn't say the culture under the previous regime was terrible, just different. And I think he realizes that there needed to be a change of pace, and he's putting his stamp on the culture guys. You need the glue guys. It's not everybody can be LeBron James. You sometimes need, a Anderson Varejao or, a Udonis Haslem at year 25, just kind of clapping off the bench. Everybody needs them to Mark Madsen. So that's kind of where some of these guys will ultimately fit in. You need the towel wavers. You need the guys who are going to stand up on the bench during a football game. You need those kind of players to add to your locker room. I think it's at least going in the right direction. Here's the segue. What's not going in the right direction is college football, ladies and gentlemen. So, as you may have heard, Friday, the Pac-12 imploded. Just ceased to exist. It's now the Pac-4. Washington and Oregon are now in the Big Ten, joining UCLA and USC. Arizona State, and Utah are now in the Big 12. And that leaves Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State as the Pac-12 leftovers. With college football as we know it kind of gone, I think it's pretty clear there's no coming back from this. Colin Sherwin over at a DK Network, DraftKings Network, had a great article up over the weekend about how everybody did their job so great it killed college football, which it's a fair thesis statement. I kind of want to bear this out a little bit with a USF kind of angle. On Saturday, was at practice talking to some folks, and I kind of mentioned, hey, thank God they approved the $300 million on-campus stadium before yesterday, and kind of chuckling like, yeah, this is it's sad. This is kind of where the state of college football is. And then went out to brunch on Saturday with Colin and some folks, and we were kind of talking. I was like, yeah, that $300 million is a pretty hefty investment for the way college football is going. Now, I fully admit this is half-baked and it's a little hot take-ish. I know it's only Monday when we're recording this, but you guys will hear it on Tuesday, so it's kind of a hot take Tuesday. Hashtag hot take Tuesday. Is it too late to maybe pause or stop this $300 million investment on a college football stadium when the sport as we know it is absolutely changing and you will have no shot of ever competing for a national championship at this level in this current iteration?
Would you, if they had a stadium approved and all this same was happening and it was when the Big East imploded, would you be saying the same thing? Do you think the same questions would get raised in the similar state? College football is dead as we know it. It's consolidating.
I think no, because it wasn't as rapid as this, right? So for somehow like Colorado is always the linchpin for this stuff, and I don't understand like what's so special about Colorado that they just get to decide the trajectory of college football as we know it is seemingly. But with a conference that had been around for close to 100 years, just evaporating within 2 weeks. Leadership aside, like they were run terribly.
This has been coming for years now. With it's sad, and I'll keep it more USF central. We can talk more about like the national centricity of it later on the Blog Boy Roundtable. But yeah, it's sad, but I think this is a thing where this is not the last realignment. I don't think this is even the big realignment. Today, in his press conference, Billy Napier, Florida's head coach, was asked about it. And he basically said, they asked him, is this killing your childhood, basically, because he's a kid that grew up in the South with all the regional football. And he was kind of like, listen, there's going to be another split coming here pretty soon. And it's going to be the schools that decide they want to invest money at a higher level, and then the schools that decide they want to kind of go with the older status quo. I think this is kind of the eventuality and what was going to happen as soon as kind of and this isn't to place blame. This is just, I think, the natural progression of things. With once you start paying players, and once you start deciding that players are going to have to get a cut of revenue, well, where am I going to get that revenue? TV money. How can I get more TV money? This is how I have to chase that. So I think it's almost an inevitability. But I do think in my opinion, this is what I've thought for, at least a year, probably at least 6 months. I think we're going to get to a point where we get to 3 to 4 conferences of 20 teams. They'll split back up into regional divisions, and you're basically trying to get in that 80. How can USF get in that 80? It's not by stopping the stadium. Your only chance to get in that 80, if you want to be in there, is to just do what you're doing, win some games. If you have this new stadium and you've been winning for the last 2 or 3 years going into it, you're now all of a sudden you're very attractive. If you decide, you know what, we're not going to build a stadium, then you're dead. It's over. You're basically, you could be a 1AA team when the split happens. Which I think even if you build a stadium, let's say you don't make the cut, there's still good football to be had, and I think it'll be obviously better than 1AA because there'll be a little bit more tradition on television, bigger brands. But there will still be college football, just be a little bit different. But the college football that the second tier might be taking place in is the more traditional model we're all used to. So I don't think I think you're kind of fine either way. That's how I feel. Now, if you want to change to the big prize, you've got to invest, because that's what they're looking at. Are you investing? That's why I think the Pac-12 died. They don't care about football. Really, they don't. Not as much as other regions of the country.
Yeah, the Conference of Championships, not college football or Conference of College Football Championships, which is fantastic.
It's great, but this is kind of what happens, right?
Right. And I think for USF at least, and harking back, it's this is kind of the precursor to when college football decided to promote scholarships to kind of make that split. So we're kind of at that alleyway right now where it's kind of like, are you going to invest or are you going to not invest? And it's finding that way. But for USF, at least, we egged on USF for the longest time for sitting on their butts and not making the moves and not taking the risks and doing the things that they needed to do and playing it safe. And, hey, we're number 2 in the country. This is great and everything like that. So this is their chance to finally stick their neck out and do something. But even if it doesn't work out in their favor, say they end up like in Seth's scenario and that, not quite making the cut, you're still investing in something that's going to do more for the campus and more for athletics as a whole than not. And instead of just keeling over and just saying, you know what, sunk cost, bye-bye, we're done with this. The women's lacrosse team is going to, be able to play into it. You're going to be able to attract multiple events that you can lease out and do more things and get, alumni back on campus for a specific reason. I mean, you look across like Division II, Division III, FCS and everything, they still have great attendance numbers. They still have great support. They still have all these great things, even though they don't necessarily get all the big benefits that you get at FBS with the scholarship counts and, $1 million donations. But I think for USF, you have to continue onward regardless of what's going on around you. You still have to, proposition yourself to be very attractive. You have to be a peacock. You have to lay out all the feathers. You have to be as beautiful as you possibly can, knowing that you don't have any legs under you because you've only won 4 collegiate football games in the last 3 years, which frankly, I don't think should matter too much. But you still have to do this, because if you don't, I'm going to give you crap for laying in your bed again, even though you had the opportunity to do something great again for like the 15th time. It's like falling in your lap over and over and over again.
Yeah, Yale and Penn both have 60,000 seat stadiums.
Right.
Like
and I fully admit, like they can't pull back on this. Like this is not like it would be like the actual death blow to the program, and probably athletics in general would just, because you're throwing your hands up and saying, hey. But I think we do have to acknowledge, man, once again, USF's timing just impeccable.
Impeccable timing.
And like if they didn't have bad timing, they'd have no timing at all.
If this was 2016 is a whole different story, but you do it now. Pretty much Steeg said it was right, though. This has to be it's a campus-wide thing. You're looking at it to help your campus out with events. You obviously 2 sporting, both football and lacrosse. Anything that might possibly come in, you don't know if any minor league teams are going to come through. You either have the money or you don't. So if you don't, then you're doing this how? But if you have the money and you're already going through it, you have to make sure it does happen. Like you said, money's already in the design process and all of that at this point. So there's no really pulling back. And just one off season of realignment shouldn't really change that idea, because no one really knows what's going to end up happening. I kind of think what Seth said is correct. There's going to be that break up, and there's going to be some people who are currently in the Power 5 now, or Power whatever, Autonomous 5, that can't write that check. That will have to then go back, quote unquote, down a level. But things are going to change a lot. Exactly. There's going to be some reshaking, and you don't know when that's going to happen. So at that point, just try to make something that's going to help you and your campus. I mean, now you're an AAU university. You can hang your hat on that. Now you're going to focus on athletics. And to Steeg's point, winning only 4 games does matter, but at this point you have a new regime. So it's like, hey, yeah, we noticed that's bad. We're fixing it, or attempting to fix it. Now it's up to Coach Golesh to do that. And I like to think that the way that everything's going right now, he has some ideas that we don't know. And there's definitely plans for that to happen. And there's players, and you'll talk about later in the recruiting episode, that are buying into that. At least that's what it seems. This is some really good stuff from Coach. I don't know, man. A 9 or 10 win season would do this program freaking wonders and rocket fuel if they could just fire off a 9-win season.
Give me 5 wins.
Yeah,
I don't give a damn.
A bowl game would be
six wins with just like an electric offense and a defense that just functions. And this, and I still will say for USF, I'd rather be. I don't want to say I'd rather be, because you want the money. At the end of the day, you want the TV money, and that's what that is. But do you really want to be doing all these cross-country trips? Be here, fix yourself as a program, fix yourself what you want to be, and then try to just parlay that into something bigger and better. But now you're in this conference. There are some people who don't think that they're their peers, but you have to look at the record and say, hey, let's fix it here, and then we can figure out what ends up happening next. But you're trying to make yourself as, like you said, as pretty as possible. And I frankly think they're doing the right thing with how everything changes within 6 months, it seems.
And who says that, once there is the big split, that the television deal for the best conference in Tier 2 is not better than what the AAC gets right now? It's not like the AAC is they're just rolling in television cash. It's fine, but it's not
7 or 8, I think.
Yeah, it's not unbelievable. You know what I mean? So if that's your, I don't think they're well, I wouldn't imagine they're playing as and we're going to get $30 million from the ACC. That's already in, I think they would have to plan this thing out as if nothing changes. which, okay, the AAC is not getting a ton of money. If the top 60 break off, well, they'll probably have a really, the television deal will probably be between two networks. Okay, well, where's everybody else going to get content from? All right, well, what's the next best conference? That might be the one you're in.
Yep.
So I think revenue will be there regardless what happens. But yeah, you want to make yourself look as good as possible for when I think this next big split happens.
There's also so much money going around that you're getting these $30 million deals. Texas is redoing their entire locker room again, and they just redid it 5 years ago. It's like they're just trying to figure out a way to spend the money because you're not paying the players as of right now. Yeah. So it's just like at some point, there's only so many facilities upgrades you can do before you're just trying to figure out, okay, I guess we're going to put TVs in everyone's lockers or giant water slide. Like, I don't know, these TV, the whole thing, and we'll get to it on the national one, but the whole thing with what TV is spending their money on is just incredible to me. And I did not expect this entire thing to happen in the way that it did. But yeah, you're right. I mean, at some point it's going to be like the NFL where your top conference, your two divisions or your two conferences, you're going to have to be under the same umbrella because you can't split your complete revenue across all these different TV networks. If you're saying that we're the top dog, we're the ones that are, players or employees or whatever. And it's like, imagine like if the NFC East could like independently negotiate their TV contract. Like that's just wild to me.
Stupid. And I want to close it on this. If we don't know where USF is getting the money for the on-campus stadium, I have no clue where TV networks are getting this money to pay these schools. There's no way on Screen Earth that like every single one of these schools is going to get a full share at the end of the day, when most of what we know is that cable is dying, streaming is not taking off. There's a lot of hedged bets on all of this stuff. How are they getting this money? It does not exist. This is like Colorado getting up there. This is like Colorado saying like, how are you going to pay Deion Sanders?
That's the neat part. You don't.
We'll figure it out.
There's going to be so much litigation.
Yes, and with that, we're out. We're going to try to keep it nice and tight this year for you guys, because we're going to try to create as much content as possible. Be sure we're about to record a new episode of the Blog Boy Roundtable after this. Be sure to check that out. We'll have
we're going to have Sean on for an exclusive recruiting pod this week for only Patreon members. So if you want to get kind of the state of recruiting and where it's going with somebody that's super plugged in, we'll have Sean on. You see him on Twitter and in the Discord, always giving good information. And then if we're talking realignment, new piece on Substack. Substack, just a reminder, it is free. Mm-hmm. If you want to give us money, like a tip, you can pledge money, but it is free.
We appreciate your patronage and
if you want a
subscription,
Patreon. But,
yes,
so we'll have some more good stuff coming out this week.
We'll absolutely take your money though. But if you're trying to pay for the Substack, that is free. Don't do that. If you just want to give us your money, that is perfectly A-okay by us. So Substack, Patreon, we have a link tree set up that Vito did. It's on our Twitter. So there we go. With that, thanks, boys, for joining us. This has been another episode of Pod by the Bay. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.